If you have a smartphone, would you just take it out? Anybody has a smartphone with them? If you have a dumb phone, you can break it out too. It's fine if you want to feel included. But everyone break out your smartphones. Go ahead. I want you to hold it up if you got it with you. I left mine in my office. That's good. Keep them up. Keep them up. Keep them up. All right. Come on. Smartphones up. Everybody all around. Very good. Very good. Now, I want you to turn your smartphone on, please, if it's not already. And if you're not already logged into Facebook, go ahead and log into your Facebook account. Go to your Facebook app. Maybe you need help from your neighbor. What's Facebook? I don't think so. But I want us all to update our status as we begin this morning. Okay? So get onto Facebook, and here's what we're going to do. You're going to update your status with this. I'm in church listening to a brilliant message called The Hyper-Connected Life, signing off for now. Go ahead, start typing. I'm serious. I'm going to be checking your status later. And so you need to do this. Type it in. If you want to tweet it, you can do it. It's well under 160 characters, well under 100 characters. Go ahead, tweet it, Facebook it, get it up. Go ahead, put it on there. It's not like you've never Facebooked in church before. Yeah. Then once you're done, everybody will know where you are and what you're doing. Turn your phone off. You will not need it for the next 35 minutes. We are beginning a series today called The Hyper-Connected Life. We are living in what is known of as the information age. It's funny, all the kids are done. And all the adults are still trying to figure this out, you know. Yeah. So we're living in what's called the information age. And the past 10, 15, 20 years have brought more radical change in the way we interact with and process information, the way we relate to one another, the way we relate to God even, than any other period of time in human history. And if you are in your early 20s or younger, you don't know anything different. You grew up in the information age. You don't know a world without email and internet. You don't know a world without cell phones. But if you are my age, or in your 40s or above, you understand, at least to some degree, how much the world has changed in the last 10, 15, 20 years. I remember my first cell phone in 1991. We call them bricks now. You couldn't put it in your pocket, but you didn't want to because you wanted everyone to see that you had a cell phone, because they were like, not many people had these at the time. But that thing, it could make phone calls and nothing else. It made phone calls. It couldn't even store numbers in it, I don't believe. And so you still had to carry around like a phone book if you wanted to call anybody, or, believe it or not, memorize a phone number. We actually had to memorize phone numbers in the 90s. And so I had 50 or 60 phone numbers stored in this head, something that most kids today were like, what? How do you do that? I can't even memorize my social security number, right? Then came my first experience with email. I started using email in about the mid-90s. You guys remember AOL? You remember like the dial-up sound? You know, all that? Maybe some of you still have that. I don't know. But... and then, you know, you've got mail, you know, we all had that. But I remember the first time email, the power of email hit me. I just come back from Russia in 1999, and I remember I was at my computer, I was in seminary, and I got an email from some of my friends in Russia, and it was like, you got mail. Oh. So I responded right away, and then they responded right away, and we were like IMing in like the late 90s, and it just blew my mind that I was talking to someone in like real time on the other side of the world for free. I mean, this was incredible. And then along came the first real social media outlet of MySpace. Any of you remember that face? A lot of you wonder who that is, but if you use, that's Tom, that's right. Tom is the guy who sold MySpace for like $580 million. But I was a late adopter when it came to social media. I didn't really buy the idea. I thought it just incredibly narcissistic, that people would like, you know, put together their own page promoting themselves and like selling themselves to the world for no apparent reason. Yes, I have a Facebook page now. Like I said, I'm a late adopter, but I don't think I ever had a MySpace page. Then came texting. Yes, young people, texting is a relatively new thing. It hasn't always existed, believe it or not. Then came iPods and iPads and tablets and smartphones and smartwatches and Google Glasses. Really pretty amazing where we've come in the last 10, 15, 20 years. You know, just think about the smartphone that you just held up a second ago. This thing that you carry around in your purse or your pocket. Think about the power that is in your smartphone. It is a phone, oh yes, but oh so much more. Your smartphone is also a map with a GPS that can take you wherever you want to go without being lost. It's a high-quality camera. It's a high-quality video camera. It's a calculator. It's a calendar. It's a phone book. It's a contacts list. It's an encyclopedia. It's a television. It's a photo album. It's a music player. It's a video game console. It's a weather forecast. It is a portal to answer any question that you could possibly think up. And we carry them around and we slip them in our pockets. And it can do all of that. Today, a 15-year-old boy in Africa has more information available to him on his smartphone than the President of the United States had available to him just 15 years ago. I mean, it's pretty amazing when we start thinking about how many people have smartphones, too. If you were to take a guess, how many people on the planet actually have these things? 1.6 billion people on the planet have a smartphone. That's like 1 out of 4 people on our planet. Now, some teenagers are going to be using this as argument with their parents later today, but everyone's got them. Pastor Dave said so. 1 out of 4, how can I not? That's between you and them. But in the next 24 hours, we will send 188 billion text messages. That is 27 text messages per human being on the planet. Now, I know there are some people who are not sending text messages, so that means our teenagers are making up for a lot of those numbers. In the next 24 hours, we will send 144 billion emails. That, again, is 21 emails per person on the planet in the next 24 hours. We will Google for 4.7 billion minutes in the next 24 hours. In the next 24 hours, we'll download 30 million apps. We'll Skype for 2 billion minutes. 2.1 million blog posts will be written, and we will tweet 400 million times. And all of these tweets and all these Facebook updates and all of these new news articles and blogs are creating so much new information that, get this, 90% of all of the data and information on our planet today has been created in the last 2 years. 90%. And with all this information in our information age, it's changing the way we live, it's changing how we think, it's changing how we feel, it's changing how we relate to one another. 71% of all people say that they are overwhelmed with the amount of information that we need to keep up. I mean, how many of us wouldn't love like a 1-week break from information or data? That I could just kind of freeze my email, freeze my texts, freeze everything for a week and nothing new. I don't have to catch up at the end of the week. It's just, there's nothing. I mean, it's just liberating to think about. 40% of us check our cell phones first act in the morning. But when you talk about millennials, more than half of millennials say checking their phone is the first and last thing they do every day. And that we check our phone on average 150 times a day. Just keep going to it 150 times a day. 46% say they would struggle to go without the internet for 1 day. Couldn't do it. I would be jonesing. I would have withdrawals. Something would happen. And 35% of adults and 47% of those under 40 admit that their devices separate them from other people. And for many of us, this is just intuitive. We've experienced it. Either we've done it, it's happened to us, a little combination of both. And so as we consider kind of the effects of our information age, let's put all the statistics aside. Let me just ask you a couple of questions for you to kind of consider just kind of personally. Just think about this. How many hours would you guess you spend interacting with a screen every day? Just think about it. Or what's the first word that comes to your mind when you realize that you've forgotten your phone at home? Is it liberated? Is it lost? Is it panicked? What do you do when you find yourself doing nothing for 3 or 4 seconds? I mean, what do you do around second 2? You're standing in line at the grocery store and there's actually someone in front of you and you have to wait. You're sitting at a stoplight. You're waiting in a waiting room at a restaurant, waiting for a friend to show up. What do you do when you have 3 seconds of downtime? Do you instinctively reach for your phone at second number 2 and start looking for something to occupy your mind? What's the typical response time when someone digitally summons you? You know, when you get that chime, that bell, that kind of says you've got a new text message or new email. What's your response time? Is it like immediate? You got to pick it up right away? Is it 3 seconds? Is it 5 seconds? Are you able to think about anything else until you can get to that text message or email? We live in an amazing world. It is a great time to be alive. In so many ways, technology enhances our lives and our ability to connect to one another. I mean, I love technology. Just this week, I was able to speak face-to-face with my son, my 20-year-old son, even though he's at college in Washington State. We were able to have a face-to-face conversation, something unheard of 10 years ago. You know, just this week, I was able to find my wife when I lost her in the mall. That was great, right? How did I do that before? I could keep up with friends in Rwanda and Peru and Taiwan for free. I could circulate a prayer request to hundreds of people with a click of a button, and they could then forward those to thousands of people in just a few minutes. I could circulate an invitation to my church family to join me for a Monday morning prayer conference from 7 to 7:30. And our church can actually pray together on the Monday morning prayer conference call every Monday morning from 7 to 7:30, like this Monday morning from 7 to 7:30. Now, if this was a text, you'd get one of those right now, right? I mean, technology is amazing. It's wonderful. I mean, again, how did we find each other before we had cell phones? How did we find anything before smartphones? How did we find a new restaurant before TripAdvisor? How did we plan a vacation before Expedia or Travelocity? I mean, technology is a wonderful thing, but it exists in a sinful world. It's a double-edged sword. It has an upside and it has a downside. And so for the next 3 weeks, we're going to be wrestling with this kind of relevant issue, seeking to find a way to take control of our technology before technology takes control of us. For many of us, it may be too late, but there is always hope for all of us. Now, man's battle with technology is not a new thing. Really, I mean, Facebook and Twitter and email accounts may be a new thing, but our wrestle with technology, humanity's wrestling with technology is not a new thing. Since the invention of the wheel, we have wrestled with how to use technological advances in ways that are life-enhancing, but also been tempted to use technological advances in ways that maybe we shouldn't. Sometimes when we have the ability to do something new, we do it without stopping to consider whether we should or not. And this is as old as our planet. You know, we can go back to the very, very beginning of the Bible and see this problem existed. In Genesis chapter 11, we get the story of the Tower of Babel. This is very early in the story, but if you have a Bible, you may want to turn to Genesis chapter 11. It was right after the great flood of Noah, the Bible version, not the movie version. But God had pulled Noah aside and he said, I have a purpose for you. I want you to multiply and expand and spread out and fill the entire earth. It is to your benefit. Now, I'm filling in the gaps here. It is to your benefit that you spread out. I mean, I imagine God saying, if you're all going to be in one place, a disease can come and wipe you all out, or there could be a war and you guys just all kill each other. You know, I want you spread out. And so that was Noah's command. Spread out, fill the entire planet. But just a generation or two later, in Genesis chapter 11, we read this in verse 1. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As men moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly. They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. All right, so rather than spread out and fill the entire planet, people decided, let's hang out together. Let's stick together for a while. Let's do things our way. And so they found a plain in Shinar, and there they settled. And the next verse gives these just amazing details. It's very easy to read over, but when we stop and consider them, we see what was actually happening. These details were given to us for a reason to tell us what was happening. It says in verse 3 again, come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly. They used brick instead of stone and tar for mortar. This may not sound earth-shaking to you, but in reality, it is. Up until this point in history, the only way to build anything was with stones and mud. And if you've ever tried to build anything with a rock or with a stone, it's not real easy because rocks are all different shapes and sizes. And even when you try to stick them together with mud and try to make them fit together, the weight of the stone collapses the mud. The mud's not strong enough to hold the stone up, and so you can't really build anything more than a few feet high without it collapsing again. But then someone comes along and invented the brick. Bricks are very different from stones. Bricks all have a uniform shape and size. Bricks can be stacked together in a way that we could build things that we've never built before. And so they were originally formed out of mud and left out to dry in the sun. And using these bricks, people can now build much larger, more complex buildings than they could with rocks. But then someone comes along and says, you know what? I think if I don't leave this brick out in the sun to dry, but if I put it in an oven and bake it thoroughly, it'll be stronger. And that's what happened. And along came even stronger bricks that can now build even higher and grander structures. And then someone figured out that if they use tar for mortar, they can make the bricks stick together much better. That gives us the ability to build even bigger things that are even safer. And so what's being described in Genesis chapter 11, verse 3, isn't about bricks and mortar. It is about technology and technological advancement that they were now able to do because they had new tools and new resources and new technology. They could now do things that they have never been able to do before, which presented all kinds of new possibilities. And people start asking questions when they have new technology. What can we do that we've never done before? And so with the technological advance of the brick, and in particular the oven-baked brick and tar for mortar, they said, let's build ourselves a city, and let's build ourselves, what happens next? Verse 4. Well, actually, I'll throw this one up on the screen as well. They say, come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we can make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth. Wow. Again, at first reading, this may not sound like such a bad thing. Let's build a city, let's build a tower, and let's hang out together. Let's be one people. That sounds like a good thing, right? I mean, what's wrong with that? Until we dig a little deeper, we see that what they're saying is just plain outright rebellion, a thumbing of the nose to God. I mean, first they say they want to build a tower that reaches to the heavens. They want to build a tower so high that they can get to heaven on their own. Who needs God to get to the heavens? We can do this on our own. We have the technology. We're able to do it. We can do it. We'll do it. We don't need God. Technology has that temptation, the temptation of hubris, of pride. Pride and technology have seemed to go together since the beginning of time. God told us to scatter and fill the entire earth. And instead we say, no, let's make a tower that reaches to the heaven. We don't need God. We could be like God. And really, they did some amazing things. You know, we don't know for sure how big the Tower of Babel was. But we do know that there is an ancient Jewish manuscript called the Book of Jubilees that dates back about 2,200 years, about 200 years before Christ. And this Book of Jubilees describes the Tower of Babel. And it actually tells us how high it was. It says it was 5,433 cubits and 2 palms high. So that's pretty high, right? I mean, anybody knows how to convert cubits and palms. But actually that means it was 8,150 feet high, which is over 1.5 miles high. Now, that would make this tower, if it were indeed that high, 3 times higher than our tallest building today. 3 times. You may say, but can they do that with bricks and mortar and tar? Other people have asked that same question. And that's why scientists and professors at MIT's Department of Material Science and Engineering did some tests. And they actually made the kind of bricks that they would have used building the Tower of Babel. And first they just sun-dried them. And they found that these sun-dried bricks had about a 4,000 pounds per square inch capacity for compression. And they said, well, if they were building it in a pyramid-like structure with all the weight kind of scattered at the bottom, they could actually build a structure up to about 1,500 feet using these bricks and tar for mortar. They said, well, what happens when we then bake this brick thoroughly, like the Bible described that they did? What they found is that the compression factor went up to 20,000 pounds per square inch, which again means if it's being built like a pyramid, this thing could be built to 10,500 feet tall or 2 miles high. That's the physics of it. And so they were clearly doing some amazing things. We don't know how tall it is. I'm not saying that's just what the book of Jubilees said, but they were clearly doing some amazing things. And they were doing some things that had never been done before. And as a result, they thought they could reach to heaven itself. They thought that as a result of their technology, they could survive without God. They said, come, let us make a name for ourselves. Again, total pride. Look at us. Maybe people will be talking about us thousands of years from now. And here we are. Finally, they were going to build the tower so that they would not be scattered over the face of the whole earth. What did God told them to do? Scatter all over the face of the earth. I want you to spread out. I want you to divide. But rather, they said, we're going to use technology and we're going to do things our way without any thought for what God would have for us. Who cares what God wants? We can do it. Therefore, we will do it. So what does God do? Verse 5, we pick up the story. But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower that the men were building. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language, they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language, so they will not understand each other. So the Lord scattered them from there over all the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth. So if you wonder where we get the word Babel or babbling, you sound like you're babbling, that's where it came from. God confused the language. It may sound like God was threatened by their intelligence, like, oh, I'm not going to be able to control them if they keep up this up, or that wasn't it. And this wasn't a punishment either. It sounds like it was a punishment. It wasn't a punishment. It was more like a nudge in the right direction. I mean, this was, again, for their own good. It was a strategic blessing. It was to humanity's benefit to fill the entire earth. In so many ways, our survival would have depended on it. And more than that, it's through this scattering that we now have the incredible rich diversity that we enjoy so much in our planets. This is the origin of the variety of peoples and languages and tongues and cultures that makes our planet such a rich and wonderful place to live. But just as these people had to struggle with this new technology about what they would do and what they wouldn't do, technology is something that we have to struggle with as well. It comes with the same dangers, the same temptations. We have the same temptation to eliminate God because we don't need him, because our technology can do things that before we depended on God to do. We have medical advancements. We can keep one another alive and we can save lives. Why do we need God? We have technology. Or we have the same temptation to make a name for ourselves. Every time I update my Facebook status, I am seeking to make a name for myself. Look at what I'm doing. Look at what I've done. Look at what I had to say. Listen to me. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, but we all want to be heard. We would love to make a name for ourselves. But just consider with me, most importantly, that just as the bricks that were baked in the oven created a new world with new possibilities, new ways of thinking, so our new technology is creating a new world with new possibilities and new ways of thinking and new ways of feeling, new ways of relating with one another, new ways of working, new ways of relating to God. And some of that is so amazing, and some of that is so life-enhancing. Some of it is taking us places where we may not want to go. And we need to stop and consider those things. Just consider with me some of the effects the information and digital age is having on us and our world right now. David Kinnaman and June Young have done extensive research on this, and they have found that this new technology is having lasting and deep impact on 4 areas in particular: our minds, on our relationships, on our work, and on our spirituality. Let's just kind of unpack these briefly, and we'll be unpacking these as we go the next couple of weeks, but just briefly to set the stage. First of all, consider the impact our hyper-connected lives are having on our brains. Studies are showing that we are already rewiring the neural workings of our minds and of our brains. Nicholas Carr wrote a book called The Shallows, What the Internet is Doing to Our Brains. And you can imagine from the title what his conclusion was. But he says this, he says, it's not just that we tend to use the net regularly, even obsessively, it's that the net delivers precisely the kind of sensory and cognitive stimuli, repetitive, intense, interactive, addictive, like a drug, that has been shown to result in strong and rapid alterations in brain circuits and functions. The net may well be the single most powerful mind-altering technology that has ever come into general use. He goes on to say that as a result of multitasking and our constant interaction with a variety of devices and screens and data, we're also losing our ability to practice deep and creative thought for any sustained periods of time. In other words, his conclusion is that the digital age really does have the danger of making us all more shallow people, of dumbing us down. More than that, it's also affected our ability to rest. You know, the excitement of our interaction with devices and data creates in our bodies an excessive amount of cortisol. And cortisol is a good thing if you're trying to deal with stress or whatever, but if we're exposed to too much of it for too long, it has harmful effects. It takes away our ability to rest, to experience peace, to sleep deeply, and it even leads to anxiety disorders after extended periods of time. And so as we start to wonder, why have I not been sleeping well? Or why can't I really enter into deep sleep? Or why do I never feel a sense of peace? Or why is there such a prevalence of anxiety disorders in our culture in particular? The answer may be our excessive interaction with screens and data and technology. One more way that our digital age is affecting our brains is that we have quickly become a nation and a culture of skimmers, right? We get so much data thrown at us through emails and texts and tweets and news feeds and all of that we have all learned a very good skill, and that is to skim. We skim the article, we skim the email, we look for the pertinent points, and that's great when you're reading certain things. But then we find ourselves, we missed that really important part of that email or that document that we were supposed to read, and then there's this miscommunication which leads then to conflict. But more than just missing important information, when we become a culture of skimmers, we then skim everything. We skim in our conversations with one another. I'm just listening for the pertinent points. I'm not really trying to connect with you. Just give me the bullets. Move on. We skim in our own interaction with ourselves. We don't take time to listen to our thoughts, our feelings, what's happening inside of us, our emotions, because we won't slow down long enough to be reflective and introspective. We skim ourselves. More than rewiring our brains, our hyper-connected life is also changing the way we relate to one another. We're going to spend much more time on this next week, but we're all probably aware of the temptation to be more present with people who aren't in the room than with people who are in the room, right? The people we are present with. And so we are not present with the people we're with, we're present with people somewhere else. Or all of us have probably experienced the pain of pouring our heart out to a friend or to a family member, only to have them continually checking their phone and checking texts and doing something else and being somewhere else while we're really trying to connect with them on a deep or meaningful way. Or we're becoming a culture that doesn't communicate one-to-one well anymore, but we communicate one-to-many. And so I go on a vacation, I have a great time, and rather than come home and sit down with a good friend and tell them what I experienced, or I have a bad day, and rather than come home and tell a family member or friend what I experienced, I go home and I sit alone in front of a computer and I put it on social network, one to many, and I hope someone will hear, and I hope someone will connect, and someone will empathize and carry on a conversation with me. So again, it's changing the way we relate to one another very quickly, and I hope you'll be with us next week as we unpack this aspect further. But consider how our hyperlinked lives are changing our work lives, and any of us who are working can probably understand how technology is changing the way that we work. I mean, how many of us would say, I don't know what I really do rather than move pixels around on a screen? I mean, what is the output or what is the outcome of that? Or we now have the ability to be accessible anywhere, anytime through our smartphones and through our technology, which means we are now accessible at any time, anywhere through our smartphones, which means we are expected to be accessible anytime, anywhere through our smartphones. And while, again, this is a beautiful and a good thing, it means that I could telecommute or I could work from anywhere. The downside is, it means I could work from anywhere, right? And so that means that we're always on. We are always on. We never stop working. And that's why, again, over half of millennials will say the first act of their day is checking their phone. The last act of our day is checking our phone. And a good percentage of us wake up in the middle of the night to continue to check our phone and reply to texts and reply to emails. And we're never really getting the kind of rest we need, and that can't be good. Finally, consider the impact of our hyper-connected life on our spirituality. With all other areas, as with all other areas, there's certainly an upside to our spiritual lives from technology. I mean, more people are reading their Bibles today, really, through technology because of apps and whatnot. We have the ability to listen to worship music online and through technology. I could listen to a sermon anywhere, anytime. I could watch it online. I could listen to it online. I can get a podcast, right? So there's such an upside to this. But there's also, again, a downside. First of all, it's very hard for us to take any time for silence, for solitude, for reflection, for prayer, when our devices are always beeping and summoning us, right? It's constant distraction. Oh, I got to check that message. What just happened? Or, oh, I got to respond to this. Hang on, God, or whatever. Or even if we turned it off, because we skim so much, often makes it very difficult to kind of enter in and spend any lasting time in the Bible or in prayer when I'm so used to skimming. Or it's also very difficult to focus in church when just a couple clicks away, I could check my Facebook status and see how many new likes I have on the status I updated earlier this morning. Or I could check the sports score. Or I could text my friend sitting on the other side of the room, when will this guy stop talking, right? Don't get any ideas. I know you've done it before, but please not this morning. But technology is changing the way we live. It's changing the way we think. It's changing the way we feel. It's changing the way we interact with one another. It's changing the way we work. It's changing the way we relate to God. And listen, here we haven't even arrived. Okay? The temptation of every generation is to think the technology we have now is kind of where we stay, and if I could just learn to manage the technology we have now, I'll be fine. But in this information age, we are just scratching the surface. Just consider with me some of the things that we'll be facing in the next few months and the next few years. Last week, Google Glasses were just released that will give you the ability to be connected to the internet and see what's on the internet anytime, anywhere. No one else will see what you see. You got the camera there. You got the video camera, 16 gig of storage. It's going to change the way we relate to one another. Mirrors and contact lenses are being released in the next few months that take pictures. So you get a great selfie just with a contact lens or whatever. Technology is beginning to be implanted into people. This week, President Obama went to Japan and had an interaction with a humanoid robot that was able to run, jump on one foot, and kick a soccer ball directly to him. It's really amazing. Just check this out. Whoa! That takes an incredible amount of balance.
Here I go.
Hey, good job.
Obama later joked, he's quoted as saying, the robots are a little scary, they're too lifelike. But it's only a matter of time before these things are in our homes. Certainly, we'll have the capability of that in the next few years. This week, a new movie was released called Transcendence that raises some really, really good questions where a person's brain algorithms and memories are stored on a computer, and after that person dies, they're uploaded into the computer, and that person then has a kind of a consciousness in a computer and begins making decisions. And while we may not be close to uploading someone's consciousness to a computer, we're close to doing very, very similar things. There are companies now who will scan all of your online presence, all of your emails, all of your Facebook posts, all of your tweets, all of your Instagram pictures, and compile it. And they begin to put together a personality of you and how you think and how you make decisions and what you've experienced. There's an app out right now called My Next Tweet that'll look at your entire Twitter feed, and it will tell you what it thinks your next tweet will be. Well, companies are now looking at how they can do that with all of your online presence. You know, when you die, you're still going to have an online presence that is an incredible memorial to who you were. There are companies out right now that are helping you deal with how you will take care of your online presence once you die. But we're going to be able to leave behind such a memory of our lives that no other generation has ever had. When my grandparents died, they left behind a box of pictures and maybe a journal or two and a Bible. But we will have this online presence that companies can then come and say, well, this is what they did, and this is what they said, and this is how they think, and this is how they make decisions. And could it be possible that that would all be uploaded into a computer or a robot that would then think like you and have your memories, that would then be able to interact with people, your loved ones, after you left behind, and it's as though they're talking to you? Again, we're right on the cusp of these kind of things, and so we have decisions to make. The hyperlinked life is here. The hyper-connected life is here to stay. So we need to develop a theology of technology because we're just getting started. If we're going to control technology, rather than having technology controlling us, we need to learn how to be stewards of technology. You know, the traditional stewardship is, time, talent, and treasure. We need to add technology to that. How do we steward technology? And again, this isn't an anti-technology message or series. It's a message of we need to figure this out. We need to develop boundaries in our use of technology. We need to figure out how to keep from misusing technology so we don't inadvertently build our own tower of Babel. We need to use technology for the good it can do and refuse to allow it to take us to the places that would be harmful or inappropriate. And so we're going to be talking about those boundaries the next few weeks. But here's your homework for this week. First of all, we need to get a kind of a glimpse of where we all are and how we interact with technology. And so I'd like to give you homework this week, and this applies to anybody. You could be a Christian or a non-Christian. Everyone will benefit equally from this. But I would like for you to take 1 to 3 days this week and monitor and track all of your interaction with any device. That means you have to get a piece of paper or a tablet, like a physical one, and write down every time you pick up your phone. Just make a check mark. Every time you interact with a screen, I'm texting, write down how long you're on. When you go to Facebook, I'm starting Facebook at 4:52, and when you sign off, and keep track of how much time. How much time are you emailing? How much time are you in front of the television? How much time are you Googling? How much time are you working offline? Write it all down. Do it at least one day, but if you really want to get a good snapshot, go 3 days. And then start to compile the data. I did this week for 3 days, and I'll tell you, what I found was really very startling. I was horrified in some ways, but I was pleasantly surprised in others. What I found was that I have, on average, 6.5 hours of screen time a day. I was pleasantly surprised I only email for just over an hour. I thought it was more than that, but that was pretty good. I check my phone 16 times a day. Just kind of pick it up and look at it. And about 40 minutes a day of wasted time in front of a screen. What does your picture look like? Because before you start to set boundaries and know what you're going to do, you need to know where you are. So I'm encouraging, would you do this as homework? Just 1 day to 3 days. Track everything. Write it down, compile the data, and just see where you are.